Welcome to Growth Colony, Australia's B2B podcast. I'm Alex from Xgrowth. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what was behind their failures. Or as we like to call them, hard-learned lessons. If you enjoy the episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share the pod with a friend you think could get value out of it. And of course, make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. That's enough from me though, let's dive right in.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shahin Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Nick Sheehan, CEO of EFEX, about the amazing B2B tech company that he's created, his journey, and we're going to be talking about his experience in entrepreneurship, why you shouldn't have a plan B when you're starting something, and staying true to your values throughout the entire journey. This is going to be a really exciting conversation, and I can't wait to dive in. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Shane.
No, absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I mean, look, what you've done with EFEX is absolutely amazing, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned over there. But one of the things that I want to explore in our chat today is, you've built this successful IT services business, but one of the things that you believe is that you shouldn't have a plan B. Is when you're going in business or when you're undertaking an initiative. Tell me a little bit about why you think you shouldn't have a plan B.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess when you think about any marketplace, whether it's, we're obviously in IT services, but you could be selling fruit and veg. I mean, it really doesn't matter. But I guess any marketplace today is busy, and competition has never been as frenetic as what it is now. So I guess, when thinking about starting something, I think the most important thing that comes to mind is, if I'm in a busy marketplace, what actually makes me different from everyone else? That ability to articulate that single point should probably give some rise to that next question that you've just asked, like about having a plan B. So if you can't articulate the why around why you stand out from everyone else, then I think typically, to go back, if you can articulate that really strongly, then you don't need a plan B, because that why around why you're different than everyone else, or why people would buy things from you, or what your value proposition is and why it stands out from the general cohort, I think that plays back into the plan B conversation. I think if you can clearly articulate why you're better than everyone else and why you will be successful, then you don't need a plan B. And I think plan B is just, I think you've got to be all in. I think back to the comment on, it's a competitive world. It's, people are walking over each other out there, and if you've got a plan B, that tells me that, you're not all in. You don't truly believe in the reason that you're better, different than everyone else that you're competing against. So I think those two concepts go hand in hand. I think people actually having belief, and I don't mean belief like we spoke a bit offline about, that concept of side hustle, and it's kind of, it plays into that plan B. They're the same thing. I mean,
let's actually, okay. So on that point, let's go back to what you said, right? You said that you have to have a very clear definition of how you stand out and how you're differing from the rest of the market, right? And I feel like EFEX has done that in certain at certain stages, where it's different from the average IT business, where average IT business is like, hey, we're going to target everybody, and we're going to, anyone who comes to us, we're going to service that. Tell us a little bit about, or the audience a little bit about, how you've managed to do that for EFEX.
So I guess back to the point around why are we different, it's about finding the gap, a perceived gap, because sometimes, those gaps come and go, but it's about finding a perceived gap, working out how much you believe in that theme, and then trying to exploit it or do a really good job at it. So for us, I've got this belief that regional Australia is both under-resourced and underappreciated when it comes to technology. there's a really big gap between being, today I'm sitting here talking to you from Sydney. Last week I was in Gladstone and Mackay in regional Queensland. And there's a huge gap in skill, in education, and ultimately in technology uptake between an office here in Sydney and an average SME in Sydney and an average SME in the regions. And I guess our value proposition is we want to be that one-stop shop. We want to be that trusted advisor for small to medium businesses in relation to providing them all the technology they need to run their businesses more efficiently. And I guess for me, I just kept looking at those markets and, there was no clear standout for me. There was no one who had, a branch network that people could rely upon. You go to those places and there was Bob's IT and Jim's IT and, they I'm just being high level. They, drive around in their caddy vans and fix things. But I guess I felt like there was a gap for, people in regional, rural areas to actually, get the same level of service that you could expect potentially, in a metro environment, but, wrap that with, local people, local support. So, I mean, that was my gap. That was the value proposition for us. It was like, I just didn't feel like there was enough education or enough, investment, both from state and federal government. There's macro stuff going on regionally. People are, leaving school in the regions and they're moving out of the regions and they're studying in cities or in bigger places, and that creates a vacuum in regions where the kids that used to go into trades, or the kids that used to go and work on their parents' farms, or the kids that used to do other jobs, that we need to find a pathway for those kids to get into technology. Like, technology is not the next Bitcoin, or I don't mean Bitcoin in a negative way. I just mean it's not a passing fad. This stuff is transformational, here to stay. It's whether we like it or we don't like it, or we're passive. It's changed our lives, And I guess we found that there was a gap for us regionally to be able to offer some of that knowledge and that service and support to people regionally, in a way they can digest, use, and benefit from.
I love that. I think that's like strategy 101, right? Of understanding who you're going after and not deviate from that. And I feel like so many people, so many organizations, whether it's at the sales level, whether it's marketing level, whether it's at leadership level, forget that. And the big organization becomes the shiny thing, right? Oh, I want to land, I don't know, NAB as a client. That's what we want to do. That's where we want to get to. And I love how you've taken this approach to expand to regional, where people will be like, oh, that's not, some people would say, that's not exciting. I want to go after the big fish in the market, and staying true to it, right? This is another important component, that it's hard to stay true to it, because you're like, oh, we've grown this much. Maybe now we should start focusing on the enterprise and start going after those. How do you hold yourself back from deviating from that core focus of the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, don't get me wrong. We play in the enterprise space too. We have a number of enterprise size clients. We deal with them. We love dealing with them. I think you know what it is. It comes back to one of my core values is relationships, and I guess we genuinely want to have relationships with people. I think the problem when you're talking to, we can use NAB as an example, but I really don't. I mean, I don't want to deal with a NAB, because we're never going to have a relationship with NAB that runs deeper than a procurement team. I was in Gladstone last week, and I went and saw a few clients, out there. Love, catching up with local people, and went and saw these folks that run quite a large sort of smash repairs place in Gladstone, and lovely
That
people.
sounds like an awesome visit, by the way.
Like, it's just love. Talk about real, like, actual people that actually care about the relationship that you have with them, and it goes beyond the transaction. And I think that for us is really, really important. And I guess, yes, chasing enterprise business, great, fantastic. But there's two sides of that coin, and I've been both the beneficiary and I've been on the wooden spoon end too, where you chase those deals. We've been in processes that have lasted 12 months. So I guess the question is, what happens if you get that deal? But equally, what happens if you don't get that deal? What is that 12 months of time? If you channel that back into your core business, if you channel that back into, let's go and get 100 SMEs. Let's not get a NAB. Let's just get 100 SMEs. Let's spread our risk. Let's deal with 100 businesses with 100 relationships where we're going to get 100 referrals out of those relationships on top of the 100 we already get. I just think that's better business. I just think that has a far lower risk profile than dealing with the big guys, because the big guys, you're just a number, and they've got professional teams that procure and put you through a lot of stuff that I just don't think as a growing business is always healthy. And I think if the mandate is growth, and if the mandate is sticking true to your values, if relationships are one of the key drivers for growth, and they certainly have been for us, then I just find far more value in talking to those guys. I just think that's good business. That regional, that local, that it's almost there's a level of emotion about that business. I always say, like, ultimately people want to work with, deal with, buy things from. This is ubiquitous. Like, people want to deal with people they like. They're the kind of relationships we try to take, because they're sticky relationships. They're great customers. They sing they sing from the EFEX hymn book. I'm all in on SME. I think
I love it. Okay, so relationships is a big component, right? And it's very obvious that it has played a major component in the success of EFEX. Are there any other factors that, when you think back, you think they were fundamental to where EFEX is today?
Yeah, I do. I think it's about two things. I do think it's about making sure you understand who externally is important to you. So for us, they're our clients. So that's really important. But the other thing, and the thing that people overlook all the time, and back to my point of relationships, is like, you've got to have good people. You just get to a point where you cannot do things on your own, and you'll be defined by your ability to get people on your page internally. And the bigger you get, the harder that gets. That is a monumental struggle at times. I often characterize our business as like, we're like a 747 plane flying at 38,000 feet, and we've got guys out on the wings trying to bolt them on at the same time. We're always trying to get to that next level of altitude. But the challenge is like, everyone moves at different speeds. Everyone's got a different why. Some people come to work for money. Some people come to work because they love who they work with. Some people come to work because they believe in the story. They believe in they want to take over the world. Some people, everyone's got a different why. And I think the bigger you get, the harder that gets. And I think the better we, and for the listeners, everyone gets at, getting good, attracting good people, keeping good people, incentivizing good people, But also, I guess the backbone to that is just making sure that those people actually understand the purpose of the business. And the purpose goes beyond money, right? Like, yeah, we're here to, we're obviously not, not a not-for-profit business, and we're aspirational. But, I think it's about attracting, retaining good people and actually aligning them to the purpose and the why. And I know that sounds like a Simon Sinek book, but it's really true. It's like if you can do that successfully, then I think you've got a group of people internally that all want to come to work and equally want to work together. And then those people there understand that, the major focus is growth and the major focus is customers. So I think for us, that's been it. But as I've sort of alluded to, it's
let me ask a question on that, right? Let me ask another question on hiring. How do you approach hiring now, or how are you approaching hiring when you got to a point that you didn't know your friends anymore? Like you've grown out of your, hey, I know James can do this, and I know Bob, and Bob can do this, and you guys come in. So what were you doing in order to get and identify good talent when you went beyond that level and you couldn't get friends anymore? Were you, were there tactics and tricks that you kind of developed over time to find good talent?
Yeah, it's funny. We have a bit of an internal joke that when we started, the business was, and I don't mean this in the in the true sense of the word, but like there was a part of the business when we started that felt a bit like that show Entourage. Like we just kept sort of recruiting our friends, and without all the external stuff. But early days we kind of had a core group of people that we all had fabric outside of work, and that helped galvanize us as a team. And then as we grew, as you rightly say, the way that you go about attracting, retaining changes. I probably haven't gone away from being really focused on attitude. Like one of my things is like definitely hire attitude, because you can teach skill. Don't hire a guy or a girl that's like got a terrible attitude but has a great skill set, because that's not going to work. But if you've got a guy or a girl who's got the world's greatest attitude, that just loves coming to work, believes in the place, believes in you, has an unbelievable sense of what's most important in relation to keeping customers happy, you can teach skill. Like, we've got enough people in the business or in any business that are smart enough or have that vocation that they can actually teach and train. Attitude's hard. You've got to get people with the right with the right grounding and the right ethic around attitude. I mean, one of the things that sort of again, as you grow, funny sort of story. We had a leadership catch up about a month ago, and part of that leadership catch up was we did some sort of personality testing. Some work around.
It's just everyone's personality. Yeah. How did that turn out?
Oh, look, it was, I guess everyone was spot on. But I guess this is the interesting thing was, out of a leadership team of roughly 10, there's 4 quadrants. So you've got top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And I guess where I was on the quadrant was like in the middle of the top right. And so this was an eye-opener for me, and something that I'd never reflected on, but 85, 90% of the leadership team were all in the top right quadrant. And there was actually no one in the leadership team who was directly opposite me. But I guess what that tells you is like instinctively, no matter how kind of deep you want to go with hiring and all that stuff, like we hire people we like, I guess there's probably going to be management consultants out there that say, no, don't hire people you like, that's not good. But tell you what, from a cultural perspective, providing, people have got an understanding of, we call it play your role. Like, people have got to come and play their role. They understand what doing a good job looks like. You should definitely work with people you like. I think that is like, we all spend a lot of time at work, and sure you do. That's like all I do, So if you're going to spend a lot of time at work, you may as well spend a lot of time at work with people you actually get on with. So,
Amen.
look, it's certainly changed from the early days when you take people down to the pub and have a couple of drinks and work out whether they're the right person or the wrong person. We've certainly grown up from that stage. Even though at times I look back and think, it was some of the best hires I've ever made was, over a couple of beers. But certainly now, we have a legal team and a HR team, and they do a great job. And I guess the lens that I try and run over, new hires with the leaders is just, whatever you do, just make sure like you're hiring for attitude, because it's hard to unwind. Get great attitude, you get great outcomes.
Got it. Nick, I also want to touch on some of the mistakes you've made over the past 7-8 years.
Yeah.
Let's talk about top three. Okay. Let's talk about the top three. Like, what is the first growing EFEX? What is the first mistake that you can think of that you went through?
Like the problem is, and this is truthful. The problem is, like, and I say this to people daily, like, I feel like I make multiple mistakes every day. Like we all do. Like, and I think it's, has there been any, I'm just trying to reflect on monumental mistakes. I don't think I've ever made a monumental mistake, but I'll tell you what, I make 50 daily, and, it's a constant learning curve. And I think one of my biggest, it's probably one of my biggest strengths, but it's also one of my biggest weaknesses is, there's a bit of an in-joke at work, like that I fall in love with people, and when we talk about that, it's like I find it and it probably was a lot more prevalent in the early stages of the business than now. I guess my styles had to change as we've grown up as a business, but certainly early days, I guess one of the things that that I certainly did and I know that a lot of young entrepreneurs do is, you have such belief in the story, and you have such conviction about where you're going and what you want to achieve that, when people quickly jump on that boat and promise you that they're happy to take an oar and help row, sometimes you can be too easily trusting, and I think that comes from a good place. And the problem is, you get burnt a few times and you sort of shut down that piece of your personality. But I think one of the things is that, that empathy and that willingness to try things is also the reason you're successful. So it's just really about trying to find that balance. And I reckon if you were to say, top three, well, top one, for various people and various reasons, but, 1, 2, and 3 would be people that I hired that, in hindsight, probably wasn't the right fit, or, probably, I was probably solving for things that didn't need to be solved for. So I think again, it's, yes, they're mistakes, but, wow, like I think I've learned a lot from them. I certainly take, there's that saying, hire slow, fire quick. And that's a very ruthless kind of saying, but I guess it just goes back to my personality is like, I'm 400 miles an hour. And if you're all in with me, like I'm all in with you. Like I'll lay down on Pitt Street in traffic for you. But the problem is, conversely, is that, this is my business and I care deeply about it. I can't always get people to care as much about it as I do. And you get to a point where you're okay with that. But for the first 3 or 4 years, you're not okay with that because, I love that saying. People say, it's business, it's not personal. I'm like, are you serious?
It's all personal. What are you talking about?
What do you mean?
Get out of the room.
So yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, the problem is growing something is, and I don't say this lightly, but it kind of is like, and I don't have children, but it's kind of like having a child, and when it's little, it needs a lot of attention. It needs a lot of love. You want to get the right people around it. You want to make sure that it's, it's got direction and it's got, a pathway, and I guess as the bigger the child gets, the less and less the child needs of you as a parent.
Got it.
And likewise with the business, it's kind of hard to let go, but equally, you get to a point where the business can't grow if you keep wanting to put it in a stroller. So it's like,
got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. All right, Nick, towards the end, now I want to ask you a couple of rapid questions. Okay. And it's a few of them. And I want to see, definitely love to hear what you have to say about these. So the first question that I want to ask you is, what is one resource? It could be a book, it could be a blog, podcast, talk, whatever it is that fundamentally changed the way you work or live.
Simon Sinek, Start With Why. I just think, it speaks for itself. I mean, it gets to the core of 95% of the reason that we do things.
Got it. Love it. All right. If you could give one advice to, people who are starting something, people who might be in the early years of business, entrepreneurs, what would that one advice be?
Don't think too much. I think if we talked offline, I was like, if you were to sit down and do a proper risk assessment on everything, every business that's ever started, you may as well go down and work at Kmart. There's no way you'd start a business. It's like, it's too hard, way too hard. So I think, think less, do more, all in, don't leave any cards on the table.
Okay. All right. Last question that I have is, what are some of the influencers that you follow in the entrepreneurship, the, sales and marketing space? What are some of the names that come to mind?
He's in a different industry than us, but we had a sales conference a couple of years ago, and I've always been impressed by a guy called Tom Panos, and Tom's in the real estate space, and he's an auctioneer, he's a sales trainer, and Tom has just got an incredible, and I mean, when I say incredible, like, he's the best that I've seen by the length of the Flemington Strait. He's amazing in his ability to articulate and cut through the rubbish that we all have. So definitely everyone should check out. He came to a sales conference of ours a couple of years ago, and he spoke about adversity, and he's been through cancer and been through a lot, and so definitely check out Tom Panos. And look, I think the other guy who's great because he's quite earthy is Mark Bouris, who started Wizard Home Loans. Yeah, so Mark, he does some stuff obviously as well, and he's an incredibly earthy guy, and he gets it. He cuts through and really focuses on what's most important. So I mean, they're two for me that I kind of take notice of out in the
love it,
out in the Twitter sphere or the Instagram or wherever you are.
Love it. Nick, this has been great. This has been a great conversation. There's been a lot of golden nuggets that you've dropped throughout the conversation. I really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you think we should touch on, we should cover that I didn't ask, that you think it has value to the listeners?
Not particularly. I mean, I just encourage people to dream big. And this is another this is another saying that I kind of have. I'm like I think one day we're all going to be in a pine box, right? Like one day the lights go out. So we've just all got to make the most of the time we have, because and whether that's you want to be the best this or the best that, or you want to try something, go and start something, go and don't be afraid to stick your neck out, because I guess you don't want to be 80 or 90 years old and thinking back and you'll always regret the things that you didn't do. You won't regret the things that you did. So that's my pine box theory. I always talk about, hey, one day we're going to be in a pine box, have a crack. There's nothing wrong with failing. And there's multiple stories out there about, Walt Disney and all these people who have just failed and failed and failed and failed, and then they make it because they're just relentless. So I just encourage everyone to just
Have a crack, baby. That's
Have a
it.
crack. Don't leave things on the table. Absolutely.
I appreciate it, Nick. Thanks so much for joining. I loved it. We'll chat to you later.
Great to chat. Cheers.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving us that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and sharing the pod with a friend. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks again for all the support, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in the next one.